Wow, thank you for that great video that was produced on the BioForge. So we're going to have a great discussion today about how a project as incredibly interesting as the BioForge can be lifted up in a city like Pittsburgh. So I'm going to take just a minute to set the context before we get into the questions. This is really for the benefit of all the guests from around the world so that you can understand a little bit more about Pittsburgh. The site you saw on this video is a 170-acre former steel mill site. This is the theme you're hearing that is in the deep bloodstream of Pittsburgh, our former steel mills. And the Jones and Laughlin Steel Company operated for over 100 years on this site, making both steel and iron. But as we know, the economic downturn of the steel industry left a lot of these properties not only derelict, but in this case, in bankruptcy. So the property was purchased in 2002 by a partnership of a couple of foundations here in Pittsburgh. Why would philanthropy do that? Primarily because this site had a tremendously opportunistic location near both of the universities. And there is an enduring hope in Pittsburgh that there is something around the corner. So post-eds and meds, there was really a growing concept of what could happen that would be lifted up by these university partnerships. So you're going to hear today in the panel about all the partnerships that it really takes to do something like evolve a regional economy into places and directions that didn't currently exist. We wanted this property in Hazelwood, which sits against the Monongahela River and beside what had become a very neglected neighborhood where major jobs had gone away. We wanted it to be a place where industry could meet startups, academia, research, and really forge an entirely new way that Pittsburgh could think about economic development. So with that, I would just like to say, when you think about competitiveness and what the large themes are for this conference, we do know that if you put together robotics, AI, and now health sciences, or as Farnham was saying, emerging tech, we have a multi-trillion-dollar market opportunity, and we really think Pittsburgh's in a position to try to evolve in that direction. So I'm going to pair up the questions in twos so that we can hit them by theme, although I am going to bookend Dr. Shaker from Pitt and end with Secretary Siger to talk more about the state's role in competitiveness. So I'll start the first question with Dr. Shaker, and then I'm going to sit down and join you. I'd like Dr. Shaker to talk to the audience about really the vision and the urgency for this work and how the BioForge does represent a model for regional innovation that puts together a lot of different partners.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for putting this panel together as well. I think as you mentioned, there was a opportunity, particularly a unique opportunity here in Pittsburgh. And when I came here 5 years ago, there was already a conversation between the foundations and the university and our health system to start thinking about what are some of the opportunities for life sciences here. And to me, the opportunity was very obvious that as medicine is moving towards biological treatments, as it's moving towards precision medicine, the future treatments are going to be custom designed for people with very specific genetics, very specific precise approaches. But the challenge with those medicines is that they are extremely complex to make and very expensive and take prolonged time. So that's really the limitation of that entire technology, and that's what is limiting us from fully realizing the promise of precision medicine. So the concept was fairly unique in that we have the largest academic medical center in the country here in Pittsburgh. We have the largest federally funded biomedical research enterprise. And we have world-class, probably the world's best, artificial intelligence and robotics engineering strength here locally. And what we need to really move all of this precision medicine to reality is to transform the manufacturing process of these medications and these treatments to make them cheaper, faster, so that you can actually do them perhaps someday even on the bedside. And that's really the vision of BioForge, was to really transform the entire industry of biomanufacturing and biologicals. So we were very lucky, previous Chancellor Pat Gallagher and myself, when we pitched this to Sam and his board, they loved the idea, and they gave us this $100 million gift. And then our university embraced that, and then we recruited Ken, and more importantly at that point also it was very important to have a sustainable plan, not just a idea with $100 million in our pocket, but a sustainable plan. And that was when we found great partners in Bio to move their, second camp of manufacturing to Pittsburgh, and to be partners with us in really taking the industry standards to the next level. So I would say that's in brief the concept, and I think the future of BioForge.
Thank you for that. Yes, a lot of big vision and thinking that went into it, and thank you for kind of laying out the complexities of that. Now let's shift to the actual BioForge with the manufacturing of these precision medicines, which really is new in the sense that Pittsburgh is going to have its own sort of a new specialized building that is going to really play a major role in Hazelwood Green. So I'm going to like to start with Ken. So we are lucky you came back to Pittsburgh to run the BioForge after years at DARPA as a having deep experience in how do we really do these kinds of things. Why would you say now is the moment to reimagine how we manufacture biologic therapies, and how does the BioForge position Pittsburgh to lead rather than follow in this transformation?
Right. So the exciting thing about BioForge was the fact that, as Anantha pointed out, the support of the foundations, the consistent and critical support of the foundations, starting with R.K. Mellon and then more recently Hillman helping with some strategic focused investments, that allowed us to pull together the strength of the region to work on things that will have an impact on people's lives. And as that smart and very handsome person on the video mentioned, it's the focus of that area, focus of BioForge, is precision biological medicines. And all of us, I'm sure everyone here, myself, read articles every day about a toddler that can hear their parents for the first time because of some precision medicine, or a 7-month-old who is going to die a horrible death in the next 6 months is now completely cured and will go on to live a normal life. You can't help but be affected by that and have your heartstrings pull at that. The thing that disappoints, though, is very shortly after reading those things, you read these treatments are £2 million or $3 million. As Anantha said, they're complex, they're very costly, and it's not completely clear where the evolution can happen. But the key is, as we're moving into this from small molecule chemicals to increasingly biologics and precision biologics, that's going to disrupt the whole approach to how pharmaceutical companies, how biotech companies produce these therapies. Every time, in my experience and in my career, you have a disruption of the way things are manufactured, the way things need to be made, it's an opportunity to create a new set of players in this new playing field. And that's the exciting thing about, that's what I mean by bringing together the strengths of this region, which are the health sciences, coupled with the AI, machine learning, automation, where that next generation of therapeutics is going to happen. And BioForge itself is going to sit at a very strategic position between the discovery-driven research, which leads to many of those innovations, but is not enough to reduce the risk manufacturing so that the private sector can scale and deliver it. So BioForge is going to focus on creating breakthroughs and innovations in the manufacturing of precision biological medicines, but here's where your heads will explode. We're not going to manufacture anything. We're going to create those innovations, demonstrate them, show that it's possible, reduce the risk, so we increase the likelihood of success than when the private sector picks it up, scales it, and delivers it.
Yes, thank you. And I don't want to gloss over the important talent that it takes to do all of this and to tie it all together in this building. So Dr. Brophy, I'm going to switch to you here now. Can you just give the audience a little bit of background on your company, Elevate Bio, your partnership in Pittsburgh, and honestly, what are you seeing in the market, and why is Pittsburgh the right place to be?
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to speak here today. Ken did a good job in explaining the complexity of these. It's worthwhile realizing we haven't been on this journey for very long in terms of biologics. So, perhaps let's start in the 1920s when Banting and Best understood that if you extracted insulin, you could begin to treat diabetes. That wasn't really understanding it. It wasn't really manufacturing it. It was an extraction. The age of biologics has probably dawned over the last 30 years when we're talking about monoclonal drugs like Humira and others, where we understand the molecular biology, we can genetically engineer cells. And those cells are grown in vast 20,000 liter fermenters, massive filtration, centrifugation, chromatography steps, and allows incredible advances in neurological diseases, oncology, autoimmune diseases. You see many of these treatments being advertised on the TV every day. But the field has now evolved into precision medicine. And it's worthwhile just reflecting for a moment on how hard this is. A number of elements need to come together. The clinical insight, how a clinician understands that if we could only affect this particular pathway, we could begin to treat a disease. The molecular biologist who brings the ability to influence DNA or RNA to make some of these happen. The third leg of the stool is exactly how it is to be made safely, at scale, and repeatedly. And just to give, just to really hammer home how individual these is, the earliest perhaps in this space was autologous CAR T. The first drug was approved in 2017. There are now 5 blockbuster drugs in this space, but it involves taking cells from a very ill patient, extracting their T cells, activating those, genetically engineering that patient's T cells, growing them, amplifying them, formulating them to a dose, administering back to the patient, and dealing with all the complexities that affect that clinical pathway. People talk about scaling out, not scaling up. These are not skills that many geographies have, many institutes have, and partly because of that, the incredibly high cost and prices that Ken indicated have come to bear and really are a disadvantage to how these amazing clinical insights can be actuated and activated. I was at the main industry meeting about 2 weeks ago. It's called the Meeting on the Mesa in Phoenix, and there were a number of very positive signs. From a money point of view, you saw investors getting back in the space again. You may have seen that, a lot of the big pharma have started to dip in and cherry pick assets. 15 of the top 20 biopharma now have active plans. You've got companies like AbbVie acquiring Capstan, Lilly and Verve and others, so that's very interesting. Private equity and venture capital is coming back in after a very long and slow period. A number of clinical assets are now beginning to reach IND BLA status, and there's a new pulse of funding coming in, which is only going to help things. The FDA have been incredibly supportive, offering technology platform designation, but also, and this seems quite mundane, decreasing the restrictions that surround how patients can be treated. Previously, a patient had to stay within the clinical center, or the geography of the clinical center, for 8 weeks. Now it's 4. Previously, a patient couldn't drive for 4 weeks. Now it's 2. These seem mundane, but this is how these treatments will become more available. But also, you will see that third leg of the stool stepping up. So what Elevate does is we accumulate technology stacks to partner with those clinicians, those molecular biologists who've got a vision, who've got an invention, and figure out with them how to scale and make their therapy available in a form that can interact with the FDA for clinical trials and then look for ongoing commercial manufacturing. And in doing that, we've acquired those technologies such that we know how to do this at scale. We have incredible people who've got experience in a number of different companies, and we've got the regulatory experience, which is not in any sense or form to be underestimated, to interact with the FDA and help those companies and those individuals take their molecules through. And in doing that, we position ourselves for technology transfer, process development, manufacturing, and really allow those inventions to take hold. We're based out of Durham, North Carolina, where we have gene editing technology, but our equivalent is in Waltham in Massachusetts, which is Base Camp 1. And thanks to the interactions and the partnerships we have here and the incredible generosity of the R.K. Mellon Foundation, these partnerships have allowed us to step up the BioForge initiative with Ken and team and clone or augment the local positioning and what we can bring to bear. And in doing so, it is expected, I think, that some of the technology, some of the people, some of the goodness will be shed into the broader Pittsburgh ecosystem. I've never been involved in anything like this before, where people don't, in a good way, get up and move and start and initiate and spark other local clinical and manufacturing initiatives as well. So we're very pleased to be part of this initiative and very, very pleased and grateful for the partnership we've received.
Yeah, thank you for that. It is a big, it's a big innovation play, it's a big talent play, it's a big market play for Pittsburgh, and we're so glad that you see Pittsburgh as a place to expand. Okay, so shifting to philanthropy, we've teed up philanthropy a couple times naturally in this. I'm going to turn to my friends in philanthropy because this is where Pittsburgh does have a unique aspect. So those of you that are going to try to poach Hillman and R.K. Mellon to your cities around the world, we won't let that happen because they are well rooted here. I'm going to start with Sam, I think, because you've been teed up here. In the case of the Richard King Mellon Foundation, you have made what might be the largest single project grant in your entire history to the BioForge, which is just magnificent. In Pittsburgh, for our global friends that are visiting, we do have foundations that are pretty old. We have foundations that are 100 years old. I think, R.K. Mellon, you're about 80. You don't look 80, but you're about 80. Is that right, Sam? 78?
78.
78. So you're going to hear about Sam's foundation and the Hillman Foundation, the Hillman Family Foundations from Dave. So tell us, why would R.K. Mellon make such a historically large investment in the BioForge? And what does this sort of mean to you as a partner coming at this through philanthropy?
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So for the foundation, this began for us in 2015 when we were starting to look at this intersection of manufacturing and science and technology commercialization. And the question we asked was, well, why couldn't you have both? What could we be doing more in Pittsburgh where we were seeing a lot of companies struggling to find the opportunity to be able to make physical things? Now, in retrospect, that doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but we're now close to 10 years ago when we first initiated that dialogue inside of the foundation. And so we brought in a firm that helped us look at what some of those different opportunities could be, and they were in abundance. And many of them were with our partners at Carnegie Mellon University as well in the space of advanced manufacturing and robotics, as you might expect. But in particular, there was this emphasis on biomanufacturing and the idea that we could make cell and gene-based therapies right here. Coupled with that was information we were getting from faculty at Pitt in particular that was coming to us and saying, well, we need our own facility. We would love to have a place where we can make some of these cell-based therapies right here, but it's very expensive. But if you could build that, that would be wonderful. And so we were hearing that across different departments within the university that led us to conclude there was some additional data points that would suggest that an investment was needed. We were hearing it from startup companies. This is right during COVID at this point. We're at 2020. We're hearing stories of companies that were having to rely on contract outsourced manufacturing in order to test whether their new therapeutics would work or not. It was a very unreliable system. So we thought there again is another data point. And then finally from the Hillman Cancer Center, where cell-based therapies, especially for CAR T, were already being made, it made perfect sense to us that if we had a facility here that was a platform for everyone to be able to plug in, as opposed to a series of one-off investments, that would be a much more effective use of foundation resources. So fortunately, we presented these ideas to our trustees. The Mellon family still represents the majority of the R.K. Mellon Foundation's board of directors. And the team here at Pitt, Anantha, former Chancellor Gallagher, Kinsey Casey, a variety of other individuals who were essential in terms of the leadership that they demonstrated inside of the university to bring this idea to fruition, presented to our trustees and made the pitch for what ended up being the largest gift that the foundation has awarded, single largest gift that the foundation has awarded in its history. Now that's coupled as well with the fact that it's at a location, as Jen mentioned, at Hazelwood Green. And part of the goal for that was as well to build something on a site where this could help transform the trajectory of a development and to bring additional momentum and partners to that place. The last thing I'll note, separate from all of the incredible health and well-being goals that the foundation also shares in as far as how are we improving human health, how will this fundamentally transform the path toward new cures for diseases that have had such an impact on society for millennia. And here we are at this moment in time where we can finally cure some of these diseases. And back to the fundamental questions of how do you make the economics of that work? And also, how do you build a workforce of the future to be able to support that activity? And I'll end with this, Jen, and where the foundation share in these goals as we do with our university partner, and I think also with the wonderful team from Elevate Bio, is if we want this to succeed in Pittsburgh and we want to build a new economy around the life sciences, we need this to be a destination for students graduating from Pitt to walk right out the door and to have a job available to them and to build that type of life sciences community here. But similarly, if you don't have a four-year degree, for you to be able to get a technical degree, a certificate, something that allows you to go and work at the BioForge and Elevate Bio with very minimal training, but these are life-changing jobs. And for us, it's that intersection of the bigger opportunity, the grand vision and idea that the University of Pittsburgh presented, but layered in with the impact it will have on health and well-being, not just for the region, but for the entire world, and also the economic development workforce training opportunities that come along with it.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Sam. It's this idea of competition, which is essential, but also shared prosperity. So the idea for the Almano site really is that there's jobs for all skill level, because talent, we need talent at all levels. So thanks. The R.K. Mellon Foundation is also a leader in the site ownership, but also in the Robotics Innovation Center that the Carnegie Mellon University is putting on the site. So really an essential player in so much of this whole transition and movement to get the regional economy moving. But the Hillman Foundation is also an extremely prominent foundation in Pittsburgh that has been deeply embedded in work around health sciences and innovation for a long time. So Dave, I'm going to move to you next, and can you talk about Hillman's investment in BioForge, but also because your foundation has been a leading investor in the broader ecosystem of innovation for quite a long time. Can you talk about your foundation's motivation, just like Sam just did with BioForge, and maybe some of the lessons that you've learned doing this work for so long?
Sure. Thank you, Jen, and thanks, Sam. You've teed it up perfectly. I think what we bring to the community in Pittsburgh, and I think I can speak for Sam here as well, to our guests who are from outside of Pittsburgh, is we can take a long view. We're very fortunate that we have very supportive boards with a mission that is place-based for Pittsburgh. And oftentimes, sometimes politics and the imperatives of making money get in the way of making long-term decisions on the types of research lines that you'll want to pursue. We can be patient, so we can start very early. We've both been funding research for decades now. And I remember in the early 2000s, we were first funding immunotherapy research at the Cancer Center. And now what we're seeing in therapeutics and CAR T-cell therapy and T cell therapies, it's really remarkable. So one is the long view. Two is the risk-taking aspect of it. And I think our foundations in particular, it has more to do with the way we invest than the way that we do our grant making, but we're also investors. We're long-term investors in biotech. The Hillman Company, for example, was a lead investor in companies like Genentech and Hybridtech. We've been very involved in biotech for a very long time. So we believe in the promise of the field, and we want to make sure that Pittsburgh has a role in it as well. The last part I think I'll mention a little bit about is the workforce part. In addition to innovating these new therapeutics, they're going to have great health outcomes for the people of this region and the world. We often talk about scale, and what scale means is better health outcomes, longer life for everyone. That's what we want out of scale. And we want this region to benefit from it, and the people who come here for treatment, we want them to benefit from it too. So there's a very important population health aspect of this. It's not just about innovating new therapeutics and technologies for their own sake. It's about the human outcomes, and that's what we want to be able to measure over the long term. And the final thing I'll just circle back to that Sam led into around workforce. These therapies are amazing, but we're also interested in the opportunity side of the job picture. We don't want to just send our cells someplace else for these new therapeutics to be administered in patients locally. We're going to have a lot of these, I'll call them bioproduction centers around the country. We want one in Pittsburgh, and that's why Elevate Bio is so important to us.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks for connecting it to the broader vision. All right, so moving more directly into the competitiveness space with Secretary Rick Seiger, who we're so pleased to have with us from the state of Pennsylvania. Rick leads the Department of Community and Economic Development, and under his leadership, the state has really become, as we see it, more strategic, become a really strong partner, and is really focused on what do we need to do to advance economic development in the state. So, of course, in Pittsburgh, we are leaning on this department heavily. The other thing, though, in the U.S. context, we do know that funding varies dramatically across states when it comes to how they partner in economic development projects, especially things like the BioForge. So, Rick, if we could have a little bit of your thoughts and perspective around the role of state government in creating the most competitive environment for business and innovation to thrive.
Yeah, thanks so much, and great to be back home in Pittsburgh among so many friends. Look, when Governor Shapiro took office almost 3 years ago now, he gave me a very clear mandate. He said, I want to be among the most competitive states for business in the country. We want to win. We want Pennsylvania to be on a rise for business. And we've taken a whole bunch of steps to do that. I'll share a couple here and then maybe just say something about why I think BioForge can be such a critical component to that competitiveness, especially in Southwest Pennsylvania, but actually for the whole Commonwealth. Number one, we wrote a plan. It sounds simple, but for the first time in almost 20 years, we have a plan for competitiveness, a plan for economic development that we're executing against, a plan that, among other things, focuses on a set of 5 industry sectors where we think Pennsylvania doesn't just want to win, like places that we think are kind of cool, but where we have a right to win. Life sciences is a clear example of that because of the exceptional R&D base we have here, but also because of the exceptional corporate base. Hundreds of thousands of Pennsylvanians go to work every day for life science companies, and we want to grow that. The strategy talks about a lot of different stuff, but let me say, I guess, 2 things. One, how we're making Pennsylvania just a more competitive business climate, and then 2, maybe how Pennsylvania's unique approach and Pittsburgh's unique approach makes this such an interesting opportunity. So in terms of broad climate, we're taking a bunch of steps. First, some typical stuff that you might see in other states that Pennsylvania has lagged behind. We've refreshed our incentive toolkit. We've reviewed every tool. And we have a set of funds and a model of new economic development delivery that we think now could compete nationally. We're seeing real examples of that. For example, we've got $500 million for industrial site development. We have reorganized our entire agency, creating a new delivery model called Business PA, where we're not just focused on answering the phone when a company calls, but focused on proactive engagement, business development across those sectors. And then finally, actually due to the leadership of the legislature and the prior governor, in addition to Governor Shapiro, we're reducing our corporate net income tax rate from 9.99 to 4.99 by 2031 to put us in line with really among the most competitive states in the country. But it's also, I think, especially true here, where I'm from and where I had a chance to work with many of you in a past life, that economic development's a team sport, right? It's no accident that on this stage you see government, you see foundations, you see the private sector, you see a brand new organization, led by national leaders in this domain. This is kind of what Pittsburgh does well. And I know there are future panels that talk about contrasting different communities. This is why I think we're well positioned to win. And I think this kind of team sport mentality is something we very much want to not just take advantage of, but enable in the way that we work going forward. And then I guess the last point I would make was specific to the BioForge, I want to be a little selfish for a minute. Because while the BioForge has, I think, extraordinary opportunity to make an impact globally and do projects with folks from coast to coast, what I actually care about is the economic benefit that you can bring here. And I think that's what's unique here. This is a part of an ecosystem that already has, as was noted, $1.3 billion in federal research funding, that has 2 leading universities, that has terrific companies. Now it has this unique asset that does all the things Ken talked about, that we think can be a real magnet, not just as we market to companies, but as projects move through Pittsburgh, to keep those companies here, to make them sticky here so they grow here. That's what we're excited about. We're looking forward to partnering with you and really everyone here to ensure that BioForge has that transformational impact on the region.
Super, thank you. I think we're just going to wind down now. We have a few minutes, and we're going to make sure we keep the schedule on time. Maybe I'll just ask you all a quick one-off question that you can give something very brief on. Where do you see Elevate Bio in 5 years?
So I have no doubt at all that personalized medicine and these types of therapies we're describing are revolutionizing how many diseases are treated. We will be at the center of that, not alone in supporting, but also developing platforms like gene editing, like AI, that will galvanize and support clinical insight and drive equity into the access of these therapies across the nation, and we'll be at the center of that.
Terrific. Ken, where's Elevate Bio in 5 years? Where's BioForge in 5 years?
So everybody that works with me and has ever worked with me gets tired of hearing me say, 2 years is infinity in my book. When you have innovation and changing technology drivers, 2 years is about as far as I'll forecast.
We'll take that.
What I will say is you're going to see a whole set of diverse, agile, focused projects coming out of BioForge that will lead to those cascading economic impact that we're talking about. In fact, in less than 2 years, we've already had one of our first projects finish, and the result of which a company that is based in Seattle and in New York is setting up their manufacturing and materials activity here in Pittsburgh with cascading implications for what it means in terms of workforce as well as economic development.
Great. Philanthropy, what's your play in the next 5 years?
Well, it's important to start as well by saying I'm confident in the future of BioForge because of the incredible talent that has assembled around this project. And so Ken's leadership, along with the team that he has put together, is what will make this successful. And the model that they have put in place that will continue to create these new innovations, as he noted, that will lend themselves to more improved manufacturing, but also the development of new companies that are going to create therapeutics and other interventions that are going to help individuals. Certainly, Chancellor Gable's leadership, coming into this role and having effectively inherited a project like this, for her to be committed in the way that she has, but also the board of directors at the University of Pittsburgh. Jared Elevate Bio coming into the role where he has also embraced Pittsburgh and this incredible facility that they're building here. So like all things, so much of what we talk about being successful in the future is dependent on the people leading those organizations and those enterprises. And I think we're blessed and fortunate, including with Rick Zeiger at the state and the partnership that we have with the state, to be able to focus on things like being more competitive and to build the workforce of the future. What I know for sure won't change is in a year's time, when this facility comes online, there will be a mother who was just diagnosed with cancer. There will be a child who just entered the NICU with a rare genetic disease. And the question for us fundamentally will be, can we develop the cures that will allow those families to live healthy, long lives, and whether that is right here in Pittsburgh or somewhere else in the world. And I continuously think about not a ribbon cutting or a groundbreaking. I think of the first time a CAR T therapy is going to come off the production line. And so when we talk about manufacturing and how that's going to make its way into the arm of an individual who's going to rely on it in order to survive what would have otherwise been a terminal diagnosis, I think we can all celebrate collectively, independent of everything else going on in the world right now, that we have succeeded. And that is what I am most looking forward to in the next 5 years.
I'll just say, I think we can make Pittsburgh the, if not at least a, leading center for the platform technologies for these new therapeutics. And I think what Elevate Bio is doing with BioForge, and Ken, you presented us with a really compelling vision for this. Look, if we're going to have these new therapies available to as many people as possible, we have to do this in a lot of places around the country. We want to be a leading center for that, and we can also be the center for those platform technologies.
Dr. Shaker.
Well, I think, a lot of good things have already been said, but I would say for us in the health sciences and in the healthcare space, this is going to be a transformative change for Pittsburgh at many levels. For patients, I see this as a process that develops amazing treatments, like Sam said, and this becomes a destination city for many rare diseases and many cancers. That's from the patient's perspective. From the business perspective, I see, as Ken mentioned, companies, including obviously Elevate Bio, but even smaller companies that Ken's working with now, will develop their manufacturing technology here, which would force them to stick here, because this is where their technology is going to be housed and IP generated. So new companies will come, and that will lead to multiple expansions and hopefully many corporations. And it would be wonderful, as Rick imagines, that Almano Brothers run out of land. That's what I'd like to see.
And well, yeah, please bring us home here,
All right,
Rick.
I'll be really brief, for this blinking light's been on for a little bit. Look, our goal is to create an environment in Pennsylvania where this is possible. And we've been really clear about what we think that means. We think it means one of the best, if not the best, economic development delivery model in the country at the state. One of the top 10 states for business. Job growth outpacing the national average. And really importantly, growth and prosperity across all of Pennsylvania, not just in our cities or our suburban areas, but in our rural areas as well. And I think that, while we haven't talked about it a lot, this kind of manufacturing-based technology offers the opportunity for the life science industry broadly, in this particular slice in particular, to create that kind of prosperity across Pennsylvania. So thank you.
Thank you so much.